Microsoft is seen as an industry leader in AI. The news over the last month or so is that they are putting in use of AI as basic HR KPIs. So if you're not using GenAI in your day-to-day work, you're going to get a black X on your performance profile, right? And I think these are things that all enterprises need to start adopting.
Welcome to Impact Insights, where we speak with those turning bold digital ideas into real-world outcomes. I'm Imad Akhtar, co-anchor of Money FM 89.3's Breakfast Show, and today I'm joined by Joseph Yang, General Manager of HPC and AI for APAC and India at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, a company at the forefront of AI native infrastructure. We'll be diving into how they're contributing to the future of inspiration and the insights they've gained from working with leading organizations across the region. Joseph, the Impact Insights podcast welcomes you with open arms.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's first talk about the AI native enterprise, which HPE talks about a fair bit. What does that actually look like in practice in the real world, especially here in the APAC region?
To set the framework, I would like to differentiate between traditional AI and what everyone is talking about today, which is GenAI and large language models. And the reason I want to separate the two is because the considerations and how you leverage this technology is actually quite different between traditional and generative AI. So let's focus on traditional AI first. HPE has been working with companies across the region for the last 10 years on AI initiatives. An example of that is a manufacturer out of Thailand, where we have built them video analytics models to use for quality control, right? And leveraging AI to validate the quality of the components as they come out of the factory line, right? So this is a traditional AI type workload. We've also worked with partners and organizations out of Singapore to do video recognition of potholes on runways. We've worked with a company in Singapore to develop a AI-driven anti-money laundering system as well for use by banks, right? So this is something that has been in the market and helping customers accelerate and improve their services for 10 years or more, right? Nothing new. What has been changing the game and the conversation in our industry has been generative AI and large language models and the impact that that can have on business in general, right? And that broadens really the impact that AI can have across a lot more industries. When you talk about traditional AI, there's a lot of customization that needs to be done or training on a customer's own data before you can take advantage of it. When it comes to generative AI, it changes the game. Everyone can benefit from generative AI in their day-to-day lives. And so when we talk about, a Gen AI native enterprise, it is really about how do we allow AI to improve productivity across the board for everyone in the organization, especially when we talk about knowledge workers. So examples of that, I think across the industry today, developers like programmers, that's probably the first place where we are seeing huge productivity gains from generative AI, right? We hear from the likes of Facebook or Meta, Microsoft, et cetera, talking about 50% productivity gains when using code generation as part of a Gen AI workload. We're hearing analysts basically say, if you are in high school today, don't look at development as or training to be a developer for your university degree, because by the time you graduate, there are going to be much fewer developer jobs, right? So that's one area where we're seeing AI really changing the game, right? Then you talk about customer support. Now, I'm not talking about AI replacing customer support representatives, but increasing their ability to serve more customers at the same time. So you take a bank as an example, right? Today, when you call up a bank for customer service, to start off that call, it actually takes a significant amount of time. The bank teller will ask you a bunch of verification questions and then put you on hold while they check that your verification answers were true. And you get put on hold a lot, right? In between answering the question and then the rep coming back to you. Now, with GenAI in the background, the GenAI can actually listen to your responses and automatically pull up the queries in the system in the back end, so the customer service rep doesn't have to put you on hold and do their search on the system before responding to you again. And that can double the productivity of a CSR, in the financial services arena. So just some very high level ideas of how AI can really help transform enterprises. How do we get on that train? I think the important thing is to encourage all workers in an organization to start using GenAI tools, right? Microsoft is seen as an industry leader in AI. The news over the last month or so is that they are putting in use of AI as basic HR KPIs. So if you're not using GenAI in your day-to-day work, you're going to get a black X on your performance profile, right? And I think these are things that all enterprises need to start adopting. Of course, having the right tools available is important, but having that mindset of I need my whole workforce to start using GenAI and figuring out how to leverage it in their day-to-day jobs.
Yeah, thanks for contextualizing that for us. There is a growing gap between data at the edge and actionable intelligence in the cloud.
Yeah.
How is HPE helping organizations bridge that gap?
Right. So again, I think this discussion about edge and then cloud for AI, a lot of that is actually focused on more traditional AI. Okay. Now, when it comes to bridging the data gap between edge and cloud, we actually have software platforms that can do that. As an example, we have a data fabric platform that can provide the same namespace. So across cloud and edge platforms. Now, when we talk about edge, the extreme view of that is actually autonomous vehicles. So certain European vehicle brands actually leverage our data fabric to span that data space across from every car having an instance of our data fabric all the way back to the cloud, right? So it's a single data platform that spans across a moving vehicle into the cloud. And that's technology that HPE has to drive that. Now, when it comes to generative AI, if you think the time that it takes to train a model or fine tune a model is in terms of days or weeks, right? The problem changes a little bit, right? Because it becomes, the requirements for pulling that data from the edge into the cloud in real time is not there, because the time it takes to train up the model is talking about days and weeks, right? So the problem kind of changes a little bit. How you use GenAI at the edge is also something that will change a little bit, just given how GenAI works. Talk a little bit about that when it comes to misconceptions about infrastructure that I think a lot of IT organizations have.
Yeah, you talked about GenAI being burned into HR contracts, which is quite a revelation. And despite the fact that the idea of embedding intelligence into the core of business has become more mainstream, many enterprises, Joseph, are still skeptical, still have misconceptions about integrating AI at the infrastructure level. In your experience, which of these misconceptions stands out and why is that so?
I would say there's a whole host of misconceptions, especially when it comes to GenAI. I think the first thing I would talk about is use cases, right? We hear a lot of vendors, a lot of analysts saying, in order to leverage GenAI, you need to get your data estate right. You need to clean up your data, make sure that you are collecting data, collating data, and managing your data in the right way. If you look at what was so impressive about ChatGPT when it came out 2 years ago, is any human being can go to ChatGPT and get some use out of it, right? Is there anything custom to that human being when it comes to them leveraging ChatGPT? No, right? So this idea that in order for an enterprise to leverage GenAI, there's a lot of prep work that they have to do, not necessarily true, right? The whole concept of Gen AI and large language models is that they are generic and they have all of that knowledge built in. So that's the first piece, right? Number two is there's a lot of misconception about the infrastructure that underlies generative AI, okay? What I see is a lot of companies taking the preconceptions that they have about cloud infrastructure and applying that to generative AI and thinking that the infrastructures are very similar. That can be, nothing can be further than the truth, right? If you look at what cloud infrastructure is like today, the servers that we have are much bigger than what is required for most traditional workloads. So we use technology such as virtualization, containers, to pack as many workloads as we can onto a single server. Now for generative AI, the model itself, to be effective, tends to be very large. And so the model needs to run across multiple GPUs or even multiple servers. So you look at traditional workloads, one server runs 10, 20 workloads. Gen AI, you need up to 20 servers to run one workload. Very different concepts here, right? So I'm seeing customers looking at, how do I run a platform to split a GPU into multiple instances so that I can share that? That's not necessarily the way that Gen AI works, right? Now, the other thing that I see is customers wanting to start small. So they will start with smaller models and see what impact that can provide for the organization. That may be a route to failure, right? We see a lot of data from analysts coming in saying, anecdotes like, for every 10 proof of concepts, only one make it to production, and 50% of production Gen AI projects fail. If I dig into that, it is very likely that customers are starting too small with models that are too small to be useful and then not getting the results that they expect. So just to give a bit of a framing of this, if you look at the size of the models that are in the cloud, like OpenAI, GPT-4, et cetera, you're talking about models that are up to 1 trillion parameters in size. So when we talk about sizing of large language models, it's the number of parameters that make up that model, okay? You look at a lot of the open source models that people are trialing on premise, you're talking about 7 billion. So 7 billion versus 1 trillion, right? So the users are using this trillion parameter model, getting amazing results, and then IT is deploying a 7 billion parameter model and expecting the same results. You're not going to get that, right? So understanding the types of models that you need to use, how effective they are, how accurate they are is also very important. And then understanding what kind of infrastructure you will need to underlie that, right? Now, customers, when you think about the cost of AI, there's also a very big difference, right? When you look at traditional infrastructure, and I'm just throwing this off the top of my head, but the hardware piece is probably maybe 20% or less of the total cost of ownership. You've got the hosting, so the power that is required. You've got the software that goes on top, and any services that make up that difference. Now, for generative AI, the math changes. Infrastructure itself is maybe 50 to 60% of the cost of the solution. Software is much thinner. The services are much thinner as well. Unfortunately, most of that profit doesn't come to HPE. It goes to NVIDIA as the only provider of the silicon today that is in demand. But that's kind of the math of Gen AI today, right? And so when you look at the budget that you need to start a Gen AI project, and the ultimate return on investment, you need to look at it very differently, right? If, let's talk about, the developer scenario that I was saying before. If Gen AI can give you a 50% increase in productivity, okay? You've got 100 developers that you're paying $100,000 a year. Actually, that's too low, but that's easy math, right? 100 developers at $100,000 a year. You should be willing to pay an additional $50,000 per developer to boost that productivity, right? And that's the way the math should be when you talk about implementing Gen AI. And the great thing about Gen AI, they don't give you HR problems, right? They're not going to take sick leave. You don't have to deal with them being unhappy, right? Because it's a computer. And so you get additional productivity gains from from avoiding those issues as well. Now, I'm not talking about AI replacing people. It's about AI increasing the overall productivity of mankind. And if I look at geopolitics or just where we are in the world today, we are at a state now where we're worried about population decline, right? You've heard Elon Musk say, in 10 years, Singapore will be irrelevant because we're not growing our population. Well, the way to combat that is by significantly increasing productivity through the adoption of AI. So we need to look at AI through a different lens.
Yeah, you raised a number of good points about AI integration, cost pressures weighing on enterprises who are on the fence about going in that direction. Let's shift gears and talk about embracing AI.
Yeah.
What's your take on the future of hybrid AI? I'm talking blending private models, public cloud, as well as edge intelligence.
I think we're in the very, very early days of AI, to be very honest, right? On-premise, generative AI is powered today by open source models that are available, right? And the biggest contributor to this ecosystem has been Facebook and Meta, right? The news from the last 2 weeks is Meta is now increasing their investment in Gen AI significantly. They just hired Nat Friedman from GitHub, or who's the ex-CEO of GitHub. They hired Alexander Wang from Scale AI. There's talks, OpenAI is saying that Meta is spending $100 million ahead to hire AI experts. Now, why am I talking about this? Because as a parallel to these announcements, there is also some rumors coming out that Meta may stop releasing these open source models. They may go into AI as a service instead, right? So,
any reason behind that?
Just because then they have more control and a better ability to monetize their investments, right? So if you look at who are the people that are investing in building the AI models the most today, it's OpenAI, it's Meta, it's X. A lot of these guys may ultimately only offer their models in the cloud and not open source, right? So I think we need to monitor these developments very closely because it's the models that drive the game, not the infrastructure. So if we have the models that can run on premise, then I think customers will want to run on premise because they have more control. It'll be cheaper. You have data sovereignty requirements and all of that. However, whether that software or IP is available for you to run on premise becomes a question.
Are there any risks to running on hybrid AI models?
Running in the cloud, we like to say that there is risk, right? That your data can be stolen and you don't have control over it. To be honest, I think that is driven by certain misconceptions about the way that AI works, right? Today, these really big Gen AI models, they don't learn, right? There is a learning cycle where, every half a year, the models get retrained on updated data. So if you were to use OpenAI model today, you will see that, there will be a date there. It's like accurate as of 2024 December. So that's the last snapshot of data. So it's not like as you're entering your prompts in the OpenAI, that data is going into their model. It isn't, right? It takes 6 months for that model to be updated with the new data. So if you can trust the cloud vendors to keep your data safe and not use it to retrain their next version, then that provides you with a significant amount of security in the cloud. Of course, there are organizations like Defense, Homeland Security, et cetera, that will never put their workloads in the cloud like that. And so, there will be a drive for on-premise offerings where full control is there. And we are seeing those asks today.
You've spoken pretty comprehensively about the transformative potential of AI for enterprises. How is this being manifested in the telco space, specifically in Southeast Asia? If you could share some examples.
Yeah. So, we do see, I would say Southeast Asia has been a little bit slow on the adoption of Gen AI in the enterprise. Korea is probably in our region, the country where the most investment has been made. SK Telecom, as an example, has been training their own foundational large language model for the last 4 years, right? With the view to leveraging those models to enhance their customer service, enhance their ability to give a better experience to their end users, right? If you look at the customer service use case that I was talking about previously, that is definitely an area that I think telcos across the region can use to enhance, how they serve their customers, right? I'm an avid fan of Singtel. I do use them as my network for mobile. However, when it comes to wanting to make changes to my contract, and this is a very recent thing, the way that you interact is through their chatbot, and their chatbot is not a GenAI enabled chatbot. So that experience is awful. Very difficult to get on a call with anyone. So ultimately, when I needed to make changes, I had to go to Somerset and actually talk to someone face to face to get those changes made, right? So you think about the room for GenAI to really improve the customer experience, even at that local scenario, there's room for GenAI to make a big impact.
What are the bottlenecks in the telco space in Southeast Asia?
Ultimately, I think, we did talk about the need for the right amount of infrastructure to support GenAI. And that is a significant capital investment, right? So that's the first piece, right? Are we willing to make the bet and do that capital investment first, and then see how the return comes, as the infrastructure gets built out? The capital investment isn't just on the hardware piece; it's on the data centers itself, right? So just as another, numbers that I can throw out, traditional enterprise data centers offer today 8 kilowatts of power per rack. When we talk about Gen AI servers, by next year, we're talking about 400 kilowatts a rack needed. So that's a huge increase in the amount of power needed to be given to the data centers. When you talk about a 400 kilowatt rack, traditional air cooling, right, blowing fans at the GPUs is not going to be enough to take the heat away. You're going to need to use new technologies like direct liquid cooling to cool down those chips, the network connectivity, et cetera. So even the data centers need to be redesigned to support the Gen AI workloads. But the vision will be, more ability to retain and gain customers, right? When we talk about telco experience, ability to, right now, I think a lot of the profits that telcos can get is from over provisioning. Customers paying more than they actually need because they don't want to be billed by the gigabyte or whatever, so they get an unlimited contract or whatever. But with Gen AI, we can more easily tailor the right plans for each customer because we have those insights and we can automatically generate those right plans for the customer, giving a better user experience for the customer and then also enticing them to spend more, right? Like today, probably a customer who's limited in budget wouldn't consider watching Netflix on their phone through your 5G plan because they don't want to burn all of their data. But if you have the right mix, then potentially you will actually lead to the lower value customers actually starting to consume more, which means more profits for a telco.
Joseph, you are an encyclopedia of knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights today.
Thank you. It was great fun.
Thank you, Joseph, for sharing those valuable perspectives. We value your partnership and look forward to continuing to co-create what's next together.